At the end of your life, what will be your legacy? What will you leave behind for future generations? For the world, join the World Messenger, Izabela Lundberg, each week as she brings you a new distinguished guest from the business, sports, or entertainment world to share their success, their struggles, and their lessons. They will share their insights into current hot topics that affect everyone. Izabela facilitates an intimate, vulnerable environment to find the true value of humanity and real leadership. Are you ready for your legacy? The legacy that matters?
Hello, my beautiful friends. It's Izabela, and we're here at the World Messenger, and I'm inviting you for another epic episode of Legacy Leader Show. And this one is so epic and so close to my heart. Can you possibly guess? Okay, I will let you know. We're going to capital of Croatia, Zagreb, to talk to one of the amazing individuals that is bridging Croatia with the rest of the world with amazing stories, videos, sense of humor. And ironically, he's not Croatian, originally not from Croatia, but now he speaks fluently Croatian. And he's also the biggest cheerleader of this beautiful small nation where I came from. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Paul Bradbury. He is Total Croatia News CEO. He's a YouTuber, public speaker, consultant, and he's helping people that are wanted to be nomads, to live temporarily or permanently in Croatia, people that are in diaspora like myself that wants to come back. But more than anything, he shares some amazing news every day. And it's absolutely my joy and thrill to invite Paul in this conversation. And good afternoon. Dobro večer, Paul. Welcome.
Dobar dan. Thank you very much for that generous introduction. I don't quite recognize myself, but it's very kind of you. Nice to be here.
Absolutely. You are doing some amazing work. And I just want to say, from selfish reasons, I could not miss the opportunity to bring you here on Legacy Leadership, because we talk about, obviously, not only leadership, but legacy. What are we doing every day to lead, live, and of course, down the road, leave something amazing, impactful for so many people? And Paul, you're already doing so much of that. So could you please tell us you grew up in UK, so please tell us a little bit about your background and how did you end up in Croatia, and how did you fall in love with people and country, and of course, language?
Okay, well, my story is, I was born in the rain in Manchester, and which is the rainiest city in the UK, and I ended up being on the sunniest island in Croatia, coming via Somaliland in East Africa. So I've never really had a career. I'm 54 tomorrow. I'm still hoping I'll find my career one day. But I've been everything from a male chambermaid to a wine merchant to a laser crystal salesman to a English, French, German, Russian teacher, humanitarian aid worker, and so on. And back in 2001, my wife of 1 year, she ran off with a hairy truck driver. And I was left devastated. And so I was drinking a lot in the pub every day. And somebody said, "You can't keep doing this. What are you going to do with your life?" And I looked at him and I said, a bit drunk, I said, "I'm going to hitchhike to South Africa." And the whole pub laughed. And when he came back from the toilet, I said, "I am going to hitchhike to South Africa. And 3 months from today, on the 24th of February, 2001, I will come to this pub at 11 o'clock when it opens. I will have 2 beers. This was near Oxford. And then I will walk out at 11:37 and I'll walk 5 kilometers to the motorway and I'll have a little sign saying South Africa, and I will start to hitchhike." And everybody thought this was crazy and they were laughing at me and stuff. And 3 months later, that's exactly what I did. And I set off on this journey. 25 people came to say goodbye to me. And I had this most amazing overland trip from Oxford to South Africa over 9 months. I was in a plane crash. I was in a gun battle on the West Bank. Everything kind of happened. And halfway, I got to Somalia. And I got a job in Somalia. And so when I finished my trip, I went back there. And having been there about 3 months, the house we had sold. And money was in the bank, and I decided I was going to buy a house somewhere in Europe close to the sea. And I came to get another gin and tonic, and on CNN there was this reclame, this advert, Croatia, the Mediterranean as it once was, like a 30-second commercial. And I thought, that's where I'm going to go. So that's really why I came to Croatia. And there was only one house for sale. We came to one island, Hvar, which I'd never heard of. And I spontaneously bought this house in the middle of August. And then a month later, I came to complete, and there weren't so many people there. And I thought it was a tourist town 12 months a year. And then I saw all the shops closing, the restaurants closing. And my favorite restaurant was closed in the end of September. And I saw the waiter the next day, and I said, "When are you opening again?" He said, "In May." And I said, "May? That's like 8 months away." And then it was only then I realized that what I'd done, I bought this house on this beautiful island that was getting quieter and quieter and quieter. And so that's how my Croatian journey began. I spoke Russian before, because I worked in Russia as an aid worker. So Russian and Croatian are from the same Slavic family. So I understood the grammar. But all the Croatian I learned on the island, I thought I was learning Croatian, but I was learning the local dialect for the island, which is only really spoken on the island. And so when I went to Zagreb, the capital, and I started speaking, people were like, "We don't understand you." So that was kind of how my journey started. So and that was 20 years ago. I've been here for 20 years. I've lived on the island 13 years. I lived 5 years in the north in Varaždin. Now I live in Zagreb, in the capital, 1.5 years. And honestly, I think Croatia is absolutely the best place in Europe to live. It has the best lifestyle. It's one of the safest places in the world. It has amazing, authentic experiences. 12 months a year, things are going on. It's affordable, it's accessible, it's got amazing nature. You're close to the sea, you're close to Budapest, to Vienna, places like that. And honestly, I've no idea why more people aren't coming here. And now with the digital nomad revolution and the remote work revolution, a lot more people are discovering Croatia as a place for remote working. And they're really surprised at the quality of the lifestyle here, 12 months a year. So it's not just a tourist thing on the beach in the summer.
Wow, what a journey, Paul. First of all, I really kudos you for taking the risk. So everybody watching and listening, you are definitely demonstrating what it takes to make a decision, stick to your guns, and figure it out. First of all, as a fellow humanitarian, I'm super thrilled for all of your efforts. And when you mentioned being in Somalia, I know how dangerous that environment it's been for the last at least 30, 40 years. And unfortunately, it's not getting any better anytime soon. So just to be even in that environment is, again, huge admiration and kudos for doing that. But fast forwarding, you mentioned you lived in Varaždin. That's where my mom used to live. And I used to come in that beautiful Baroque city.
That's beautiful, really is beautiful, yeah.
Yes, and then just a nice walk in Old Town and castle, and it's been known as a city of angels.
Yes, that's correct, yeah. Yeah.
And when my mom passed away, I remember walking the streets and just felt her presence. It just felt such a beautiful peace and tranquility, because you have to be there to really understand, because again, great food, harmony, beautiful architecture, but in the same time, beautiful history, very close to Hungary, as you pointed out. So now from Island Hvar to capital and everything in between. So just do you mind sharing a little bit about how did you adapt? Did you feel like it was a huge cultural shock, or what was some initial highlights that really make you kind of pause and think, oh, this is very different, or to say, oh my God, I was waiting for this all my life?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, you know, you say about starting again when I walked out of the pub in Oxford. I mean, literally, I left my whole life behind. I did an agreement on the furniture. I had a small rucksack about half size, and I literally, when I left, I didn't look back once, and I walked out. And as soon as I got that first lift with a stranger, I was basically in a new life. And I can honestly say it was the most liberating thing I've ever done. And if you are stuck in life, it really is possible to start again. You know, I didn't have an amazing amount of money, and I just had this desire to get away, to start again, to lick my wounds and have a think about things. So, so that was that. But when I came to Croatia, a lot of my friends were really angry with me because I've been a humanitarian aid worker in Somalia. I was in Rwanda after the genocide in '94. I worked all over the former Soviet Union, and I'd been to places like Gaza and the West Bank. And my friends are really angry with me because they thought I was buying in a war zone. This was 2002. And they couldn't believe I was buying on a place where the war was still going on, or so they thought. And then I sent them pictures of the town Yelsa on fire, and they were like, "This place is beautiful." And it was really idyllic. And I really got into this lifestyle back then. I was picking the grapes, picking the olives, swimming every day in September, and just getting up at 6 in the morning, walking 4 kilometers by the Adriatic to go for a coffee. I was writing a book about my trip. It's now on Amazon, called Lebanese Nuns Don't Ski, and I thought I was going to become a writer, and then that dream sort of failed, and so I had to really start afresh and being self-employed. And I've been self-employed for 20 years now in Croatia, and I've tried everything. I mean, we had a real estate agency, which was amazing, just as the real estate prices were going up in 2003, 2004, and then we had the crash. I've done a lot of things with franchises for certain international products. I've tried real estate in Albania, Montenegro, and it's been a constant struggle just to keep going. But the actual lifestyle here is fantastic, and I've got 2 amazing kids, and just bringing them up on an idyllic Dalmatian island where the sense of community and safety. You go down to the square and somebody's always looking out, and every single celebration has 4 generations of family. They learn to swim at the age of 2. For them, the Adriatic was like a swimming pool that was just there all summer. They went with their grandfather into the field to help sort of work the potatoes and the tomatoes and stuff. So they have that real affinity to nature. Where I come from, Manchester, and all my tomatoes are they're produced in supermarkets 24/7. And the thing that is amazing about Croatia is the freshness of the produce. And so you don't get everything 12 months a year as you do back in the UK, but when you have the asparagus season in March, it's sensational. And then you have the mandarins in November, and you have the tomatoes and stuff in June, and you can just find yourself adapting and looking forward to the season because it's going to be that amazing freshness again. So it's a completely different world compared to what we have back in the West in terms of quality and freshness of produce. And it's just relaxed. I mean, there is corruption, of course there is, but there's also that sort of laid-back lifestyle. And I was particularly on an island when in the winter there's really nothing happening. So you're just there at one with nature, and I found it amazing. And to raise kids, I don't think there's anywhere better in the world, honestly. And I'm so glad that my kids had that sort of early start in life with that safety and that community and that nature and stuff.
Wow, what a great journey again I love what you bring in. Connect to the nature, shift so that you can be also in the summer in very busy tourist environment, but also be able to pause, recharge, and also raise the children that are not so codependent, that we see kids and very stressed out, frankly, because of how fast everything is going and expectations, but also to not only be in a healthy environment and eat healthy, but also to have people that are not constantly in a rush, and that you can have a quality conversations and truly raise them in a way that obviously every single parent crave, that they have more time, that they're better, best version of themselves. And that is really hard to compete with urban life and a lot of stressors that drives as well.
I'll tell you, it was interesting when I first got there. The first Christmas tree went on the main Christmas tree on the main square went up on December the 15th, 10 days before Christmas. That was the first sign of any Christmas decoration. And Christmas Day was always like 1 or 2 presents for the kids, 1 present for everybody, Sunday lunch, Christmas lunch, and then that was it. And it was a night, and then we'd go for a long walk or something like that. And so all this commercial stuff that we have in the West, and all the importance of, in the UK it starts in October or in September, the run up to Christmas. It's just nuts. And what I loved about living on the island was it was very, very non-commercial. People they came from the soil, basically. They had a very, very hard life. And when the phylloxera came in the 19th century, a lot of people had to emigrate because it was a wine island and there was no work. And then tourism came to help things. But that culture of living from the soil, pretty much every family on the island has a piece of land and they grow their own food. So grandfather will come back from the field and there's your tomatoes and your blitvas, Swiss chard and courgettes and all these things, and it's all grown in the field. It all comes back. It's all straight from the field, from the family field to the family table. Grandma makes an amazing meal, and there it goes. And that, I think probably my favorite story about tourism in Croatia was a friend of mine, and he has a luxury tourism business on Hvar in Dalmatia, on this island. And he said the day I learned about quality luxury tourism and how to do it was I was in an olive grove with a group of New York Jewish tourists, and we had this amazing olive oil tasting. We had this peka, this amazing meal. It's cooked under this iron bell with like meat and potatoes and onions and stuff, really slow cooked. And this guy said, "Excuse me, is that a lemon tree over there?" And my friend said, "Yeah." He said, "Would it be okay if I picked a lemon?" This New York guy. And my friend said, "Pick 6 if you like." "Wow, thank you very much." And at the end of it, at the end of the tour, at the end of the week, he said, "This was an amazing, life-changing week in my life, but I want to tell you what my best experience of the whole week was. It was picking that lemon from the tree, because I live in New York, and the only lemons I ever see are in cocktail bars and supermarkets. And so just to have that connection with the soil." And then my friend realized that, we don't really appreciate what we have here, but people who come there, they're amazed by it. So if he could come up with some projects and some tools which monetized that sort of authentic lifestyle, he could give amazing service and have no costs. So, and so his business flourished. And people, I used to send the kids out in the evening and just pick a lemon from the tree, please, because Daddy's gin and tonic's waiting. And they go out and pick a lemon, and then we'll cut it and then sit on the terrace and watch the sun go down. It's magical.
I love that story. And what's so beautiful is not only connection with the nature, as you mentioned, but then also opportunity for us to really pause and reflect what matters the most. The quality of relationship you have with your children, with your family, with people in the island. Opportunities to really connect and bond in such a deeper, meaningful way, right?
Yeah.
And then one thing, what I really love and what I miss is the ritual of having a meal, ritual of having coffee, just that consumption that you're so present and aware. It's not just to be let's go fast, but it's more about let's enjoy, let's smell the ocean, the beautiful winds that are bringing all the smells from the land, from lavender, from olive trees, but in the same time, let's pause and embrace it. And we forget to do that.
We do, and there's a reason that Starbucks doesn't exist in Croatia. It's just it wouldn't succeed here whatsoever. And it's really interesting, if you take a photograph of the coffee ritual on the waterfront, people sitting there for an hour and a half with one espresso, and then you take a photograph of Starbucks where they're all sitting inside and they're having these crazy expensive coffees, and a lot of them are working on their laptops and so on like that. That sums up the difference in terms of lifestyle. And what's really nice for me is seeing all these digital nomads that are coming, and they're going, wow, this is a lifestyle. And during the pandemic, we had a couple of Americans from Silicon Valley, from San Francisco, and they came to this island, and they rented our place on Hvar for 7 months in the end. And they were like, winter on this island is just insane, because it's just nature, peaceful, the internet's fine, and the human relationships you can get out of season because everyone's got time to talk. And they said there's nowhere better, really. And why the Dalmatian Islands are not more populated and more, not more lively, because it's just so magical compared to all the stress of modern life elsewhere. So it's definitely a slower way of life. But I say that particularly in Dalmatia, living in Dalmatia is a little bit like having malaria. Once you get it into your blood, it's there for life, and you can never quite get rid of it. And so I probably would struggle to go back to Manchester and try and live and work in a normal sort of way that people do there, just because I've been here too long now, and I've become native, I suppose.
That's fantastic, and a great comparison, because also you get, as you mentioned, so much sunny days and lacking sunshine. in Manchester and just in general in UK, I know a lot of my friends, they're like, Izabela, we have a season fatigue and from gray and rain, and we really sometimes have also seasonal depression, and that's why I was so interested in how many actually fellow Brits will come and visit, and they will be like, oh my God, we really need this, and it's so nice also to have that opportunity to compare, to go places, but also adjust and have a sometimes best of the both worlds, and seems like you immerse yourself so deeply in Croatia. So Paul, do you mind sharing some pivotal moments? Obviously, fortunately, very emotional, heartbreaking event springboards you to take a leap of faith and jump into and just kind of see where you go, right? And go on that journey. So do you mind sharing what was some of the pivotal moments in making these decisions? Because so many people feel it, but they don't act on it. What was different for you to do that?
It's interesting because to me at the time it seemed so natural, and now when I tell the story, people are like, "This is crazy." You know, it's one of the craziest stories I've ever heard. And my kids are like, "How are you still alive, Dad?" You know, with all the sort of, because I've always been a very spontaneous person. But to me, when I look back at that situation, you know, the relationship was finished. I was in a job I didn't enjoy at all. Most of my friends, it turned out, were her friends. So I actually didn't really have any friends. And the only thing that was keeping me there was the local pub and the alcohol, you know. And I realized if I kept, because I was drinking 5 beers at lunchtime, and then I was in the wine business. I was doing my wine deliveries. And then I was having like 12 beers at night. And then I'd go home and have 2 bottles of wine and then a jar of jalapenos. And that was all I'd eat for the day. And I was a total wreck. And then when I made this decision, I suddenly thought, wow, there is what is keeping me in this life? I got a pen and paper. I said, what are the things that are keeping me in this life versus what if I try and start again? What is there to be afraid of starting again? And, you know, I had about £7,000, about $11,000 in savings. That was it. And I had a commitment to my father in the wine business in 9 months. So I had a 9-month window to go and explore and sort myself out and everything. And I just thought, you know, the only thing really here is a family, and that's kind of it. But, you know, I've traveled before and stuff, and so they're kind of used to it. And there's really nothing else. And I've got $11,000. Why don't I go and spend that? I was 32 at the time. And let's just go and explore, and let's see what happens. And I've always been somebody that's gone and explored, and something always happens. So I was working in Moscow. I got fired. I resigned from a job because it was all mafia. And I met a girl in a bar, and 2 days later, I was on a plane to Africa to go and work in Rwanda and the genocide. So, you know, the first time in Africa kind of stuff. So I've always been, and because of my humanitarian aid network, I knew I could probably get a job back in that network if I wanted to. So what I did was I contacted all my friends from the aid work world before this relationship. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I've not been in touch for 5 years. I met a girl, now it's all over, and now I'm going traveling again. And I have this route through the Balkans, through the Caucasus, through Middle East, East Africa, down to South Africa. And if any of you are working in these places, or if any of you know somebody that might, you know, give me a bed or go for a drink or something like that, it would be great to hear from them. And the response was phenomenal. You know, there was a girl in Tajikistan who I worked with in Dushanbe in 1994, and she was now living in Albania, for example. So I hooked up with her for 2 weeks, and we traveled through the Balkans. There was a guy I worked with on the edge of Siberia. He was now living in Zagreb. There was another guy who was in Eritrea and stuff like that. So I did my first trip. When I started the trip, I got as far as Vienna, and then I wrote this report. I had hair back then, but I had ginger hair back then. And my email address was gingerdoesafrica@hotmail.com. And so I had these things called the ginger reports. So I did the ginger Vienna report, and I just wrote back to my friends who were in the pub and a few other people saying, hey, I'm alive. This is what happened to me in the last week. I'm now in Vienna with my friend George. And people are like, this is amazing. Please write more. So when I got to Sarajevo, which I found fascinating in 2001, I wrote the Sarajevo report. People, this is amazing, amazing, amazing. I got completely hooked on the Balkans. I spent 7 weeks. I was in Pale, I was down in Albania, I was in Kosovo, I was in Belgrade the day Milosevic got arrested. It was just insane time. And then what happened was the friends of mine would recommend friends who were in these destinations, and they would forward my ginger reports to them so they could see what kind of guy I was. And they were like, wow, these are really interesting reports. And he writes about his hosts. So everybody gave me amazing hospitality. So everywhere I went, I just met the most incredible people, and there was a party every night, and it was all this because I was kind of interesting to them, they were interesting to me, and I basically had 9 months of insanely great hospitality all the way down. And I didn't take a camera, I didn't take a phone. This was before Google, really. It was 2001. There was no TripAdvisor. There was no social media. There was nothing really to reference. There was the internet cafe. There was one forum on lonely planning called the Thorn Tree, and that was the only thing you could do to connect with travelers. And you know what? The memories of that trip are still here today, like this, and all the other stuff I've done with social media ever since. It's kind of a blur. And by the time I got to South Africa in 9 months later, I came back to the UK, came back to the pub, walked into the pub, and the girl, same barmaid, Sarah, beautiful smile, she just looked up, picked up a glass, started pouring, and said, the usual, as though I hadn't been anywhere, And I looked around the pub and nothing had changed in 9 months, and my life had completely and utterly changed. And I was so grateful that I'd made that leap. So my advice to anybody is, if you're stuck, change it.
I love that. Again, everybody watching and listening, Paul, as he mentioned, you have to take a courage, you have to take a leap of faith, and you have to let yourself to experiment, to try, and then journey might take you on places you never imagined, like in Paul's situation. But Paul, you always obviously leverage storytelling and an amazing human people connection. First of all, what you just shared, I would love to learn a little bit. How was the experience to be in Rwanda post-genocide? Obviously, you were there in 2001, I believe you mentioned.
No, Rwanda was 94. So the
94. Okay, so you were right during the time when it was really happening. Wow.
2 weeks after it finished, it was my first time in Africa, and it was. I'll be honest with you, it was the best time of my life. I've never had such adrenaline. I've never been given such raw emotions. I've never worked as hard. I've never had such great camaraderie with colleagues. I've never had such horror. I've never had such disappointment as when a lot of my colleagues I'd worked with for months got arrested for genocide, and turns out they were actually murderers, and I've been working with them for months. So it really, really played in my brain. It was in a way that nothing else has done in my life. But I really, really, really was grateful for the opportunity to be there for that. And probably the nicest moment of my life was because I used to do these distributions where we'd be up at 5 a.m, and we'd have about a convoy of trucks with about 150 metric tons of seeds and tools and beans and things like that. And I would come to a field in the middle of Africa at 7 a.m, and then you'd see the first silhouette walking across the horizon. And some of these people had walked 20 kilometers to come to this distribution point. And there were 5 of us, 5 locals, Rwandese staff and myself. And we had just had these ropes and stakes and everything else, and we unloaded, and we got all the village leaders. We had the lists, we'd already prepared all that before. And we were giving out 50 kilo bags to 5 heads of families to divide by 5. And then they would put this on their head and then walk 20 kilometers back home. And 3 months later, all these people had their lives decimated. To go through the fields and see them harvesting the bean harvest from the beans that were given out, so actually their food security was starting again, was just awesome. It really was. It was. I mean, but it really messed with my head, Rwanda, for many years. In fact, I just had therapy for the first time in 28 years later, and talking about something else, and all this stuff about Rwanda came out. It was amazing. So I actually went to the States in April to go and hug 6 people who I'd worked with in Rwanda in 1994, just to sort of put that to rest. So, if you look at Rwanda today, it's semi-dictatorial, but it is the cleanest, safest country in Central Africa. There's no ethnic. Everyone's Rwandan now. They're not Hutu or Tutsi. It's one of the fastest growing economies there. They are in the top 10 places in the world for luxury tourism for billionaires. Billionaires are going to Rwanda to see the gorillas and all the infrastructure there. They banned plastic bags from the country totally in 2009. They deliver emergency blood by drone anywhere in the country within 30 minutes. And this is this is a country that was killing itself, that murdered 12% of its population in 100 days back in '94. So when you compare what happened obviously in Croatia and former Yugoslavia, which at the same time, and the big difference obviously was that they had the reconciliation, which has never really happened here in Croatia, and so the hatred and stuff goes on. There's no illustration here, but a phenomenal achievement for such a small country and such a backward country with nothing really. So yeah, I'm always forever grateful for the opportunity for Rwanda. I went back in 2001. And that was very traumatic because on this trip actually, because my best friend, my best local friend, who was a fluent Russian speaker, he was arrested the day I left and beaten up and stuff. And I tried to get him out, and then I left. And so I went to try and find him 7 years later. So I went to all the prisons, and I found some of my former colleagues that were still there in prison 7 years later. It was, but it's this. I mean, if anyone's interested, I wrote a book about this whole trip from the pub to, and it's called Lebanese Nuns Don't Ski, and it's on Amazon. So if you want to read it, then it's there. It's quite a good read, actually.
Thank you so much for sharing that journey and the reason why. And then you touched on questions that and situation, because when the Rwanda genocide occurred, obviously war still was happening from Yugoslavia, and we were waiting for intervention. And after, obviously, there's different political moments in history. There was then, this is what happened in Rwanda. You guys didn't stop and prevent it. What else we can do? And there was kind of almost like an afterthought. And also, where do you really put efforts to prevent or do something? Yeah. But one pivotal moment for me happened because at that time I was actually on political asylum in Sweden as a teenager who escaped also ethnic cleansing, genocide, war trauma, torture, and finding myself and seeing beautiful artists from Rwanda who happened to be actually at the time in Netherlands for an art exhibit. Right. And who through Swedish friends was brought to Sweden, because Sweden at that time, excuse me, was taking not only political or just in general asylum seekers who were trying to escape. He was by default there, and I could never see a recognition of survival guilt that both of us exchanged at that moment, because he was so desperately wanted to go back, but he knew that he couldn't at that time. And later on, it's just so fortunate that so many of those families that I encounter over in Sweden at that time lost everything. There were not many to begin with, but the ones that just happened to be, or could not return back home, or they were looking to stay in Europe, or they didn't know what is the best course of action to do, dealt with so much survival guilt because they were not there, and they felt like they could not defend their loved ones. And some of them truly lost absolutely everyone. So when we look at that other side, I'm glad you brought up the point of reconciliation, and I'm so glad to see them thriving, right? But then also in so many ways, Croatia is rebuilding and going towards the thriving economy and culture. But it's fortunate that sometimes you can't have a dialogue and reconciliation just with one party, right? It takes everyone to get involved. And when people ask me, Izabela, is it still safe and peaceful there? I'd love to, if you don't mind, you mentioned it's a very low crime, a lot of tourists. What is your sense of everything, Paul? So that comes from, no Croatian, no bias perspective, please.
In terms of safety, I would say that it is one of the safest countries in the world. And a lot of Australian diaspora are actually moving back to Croatia to bring up their families here. And safety is one of the number one things on the agenda. And there was a big survey in Nomad List, which is this big website for digital nomads. And I mean, Croatia ranks really highly. I was one of the co-founders of the Zagreb Digital Nomad Week in 2021, which is the first sort of big thing to put Zagreb on the map. And now Zagreb currently constantly ranks in the top 5 places in Europe for digital nomads to go. But one of the things in the survey was that the disparity between male and female nomad preferences, and there was a 20% increase of female over male nomads coming to Croatia, citing safety as one of the main reasons. So female travelers here feel extremely, extremely safe. And, you know, a lot of Americans, they're just amazed seeing a girl walking home at midnight in the city, and no one's going to harass her or anything else like that. And so it's a real shock for Croatians when they go abroad to see, my God, this is so uncivilized elsewhere. So I would say safety is one of the biggest attractions we have. And then, you know, the lifestyle, and also we have, you know, there's so many authentic experiences here, because every single village has something to celebrate. They've got some insane festivals. I mean, the biggest festival on far is the Edible Dormouse Festival. They have a lavender festival. They have a fava bean festival, and another place where they have fava bean ice cream and that kind of stuff. And everywhere has their own Saints' Day. And then there's a town called Vinkovci in eastern Croatia, where they have the Vinkovački jeseni, Vinkovci autumn, and all the villages around in Slavonia dress up in their traditional dress, and all the kids, you know, all this traditional dress. There is such pride, and it's just one of the most magical sort of events, I think, in Croatia, because it really brings all this tradition and all this sort of, and again, the community, the generations that come together. It's the grandmas walking with the grandkids, and they're all together and they're all proud about their own village and stuff. And it's wonderful to watch, and it's something that we've lost in the West, I think.
I love that again, and thank you so much for highlighting, so that all my fellow Americans and my global colleagues and friends that are eager to explore can kind of get peace of mind, and then also can say that war and conflicts, it's past history now. We'll learn from it, we will not forget it, but we will also moving forward, and we are part of the EU, and just so many other beautiful highlights.
But it's actually interesting, because if you look at Croatia, Croatia was in Eastern Europe. It was in the Yugoslavian Eastern Bloc, and the UK, Britain was like a part of the EU, was like a big sort of you know, one of the most important passports in the world. And what's happened in the last few years is Croatia joined the EU in 2013. It joined NATO. 1st of January this year, it joined the Schengen zone. We now have visa-free access to the States. We've just signed a double taxation treaty with the States, which comes into effect later this year. So actually, if you have a Croatian passport, it's one of the most powerful passports in the world now. And if you have a UK passport, it's terrible, because, you know, you can't even get, you know, it's hard to get into Europe even now. You know? And so there's been a lot of progress has been made for Croatia, integrating it into the European family. And it's definitely pointing very much towards Western Europe and being a true European country. And, you know, for a country that was 30 years ago, I mean, it's only 30 years ago that Dubrovnik, UNESCO World Heritage Site, was being shelled. You know, and so the progress that's been made there. And just to say about Americans, I mean, Americans are very, very welcome here, very, very welcome. And during the pandemic, Croatia was the only EU country which was open to American tourists. And we brought ABC News over to Croatia. So they contacted me, and so I arranged a 6-day trip for them down to Dubrovnik. And we had 6 reports on ABC News, including Good Morning America, which was watched by 12.5 million people. And this was also at the time of the digital nomad visa coming in. So this message of Croatia being welcoming, beautiful, remote work, it all went out at the right time. And now we have direct flights from New York to Dubrovnik. And so it's much, much more accessible than it ever has been. And Americans are very, very welcoming.
Such a beautiful, powerful impact you created, Paul. First of all, I just wanted to kudos you for because people don't realize that we're less than 4.5 million of people, and with the diaspora, you know, a lot of people that are coming back, and then also nomads from other countries. But yet it's not so populated, yet has so much history and diversity in terms of nature, cities, modern and ancient. And Dubrovnik, obviously, it's very close to my heart personally. For everybody that don't know, please Google, check it out. And also, I wanted to heavily recommend to go check Paul Bradbury's YouTube channel, and where he has amazing videos, great sense of humor, but also great storytelling and beautiful background of a backdrop of gorgeous nature, and obviously, of course, people that you will not regret and get a little bit more sense of. And speaking of that, Paul, where they can find you, where they can, obviously, you have a great book that is on Amazon. They also have channel, and we'll add all of those links, guys, to make it easier for you in the end. But I want to really make sure where you can find and more information, and also ask Paul all these great questions so that you can have amazing journey. Either you're trying to permanently move there, or just to be a nomad, or anything in between.
Okay. Well, I've just co-authored a book with Lauren Simmons called Croatia, a Survival Kit for Foreigners. And this is a mixture of stories from my 20 years and also a very practical guide about how to open a bank account, how to find a dentist, that kind of stuff. And that's on Amazon. I've just started a YouTube channel, as you mentioned, it's called Paul Bradbury Croatia Expert. So if you go to YouTube, you can find that. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So you find me there, and then I run the biggest English language news portal here called Total Croatia News. So if you go to totalcroatianews.com, you'll find your daily dose of Croatian paradise.
Wow, Paul. So back to my question that I always ask. You obviously living your legacy, you're leading with your legacy, and of course, not only having because you have children, but because you created so much value and impact for others. You are also have amazing legacy to leave behind for future generations, and definitely for people in Croatia to be supported in ways that you leverage all these amazing tools to make it happen. Paul, what is left in bucket list? And what legacy you would like to still achieve, and what it is legacy for you, and what that means for you and your family, and yet to accomplish?
I mean, for me, the most important thing is I want happiness and health for the family. I want, the kids are now 16 and 14. I see becoming an adult in the modern world is full of challenges that we didn't have 20, 30 years ago. And I want to try and help them navigate them through that. And as for the rest, I just really enjoy living here, and I'm actually really enjoying living in the region. And so this YouTube channel is going to be exploring the rest of former Yugoslavia, Albania as well, places I've been to the last 20 years. And we're just about to launch a TikTok channel, so I'll be a 54-year-old TikToker. Sounds pretty sad, doesn't it? So, but every day is different. It's a beautiful country. The stories, the characters here are never ending. And if you wake up with an open mind and don't take yourself too seriously. And I guess the biggest advice I would give people to who are thinking of moving to Croatia is comparison is the thief of joy. If you expect it to be exactly like it is back home, you're going to be disappointed. It's different. And you look a bit like, the asparagus season versus 12-month asparagus is different. And once you get used to it, it's better. And I have a saying, a sentence of advice, which took me 15 years to formulate, about doing business in Dalmatia, because I came as a fairly arrogant Westerner going, they need this, 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 this. And then so many people come and go, these Dalmatians are so lazy, they're so stupid, they don't have this and this and this. And after a while they get frustrated and then they leave. And I realized that it took me 15 years, but the sentence was this. And I said, if you can listen to this sentence, understand this sentence, and live by this sentence, you will have the gates to the kingdom. If you listen to the sentence and don't follow it or don't understand it, you'll have years of frustration until you come back to the sentence, or you'll leave. And the sentence very simply is, do not try and change Dalmatia, but expect Dalmatia to change you. And if you can really understand what that means and live by that from the beginning, it's magical. It's hard with our Western mindset, but and it took me 15 years, but that's definitely the way it is. So, come with an open mind. Don't expect everything to happen tomorrow, because it won't. If it works in any other country in the world, it might not work in Croatia. And there's definitely corruption, and the bureaucracy is challenging. But for me, I think the positives far outweigh the negatives, and there's nowhere else in Europe that I'd rather live.
Then leave us a positive review whenever you are listening on whatever platform there might be. Make sure your friends and family also know about the benefit and value that we provide and what we have to offer. Cheers.